the cycle of relapse. And it talks about relapse as a process, right? Not a single event. And it goes back to what you were talking about just a few moments ago. There's emotional, mental, then physical, right? And like emotional kind of starts out with like the denial of the
Right.
circumstances. And then there's mental where it's I'm reminiscing about it now. I've had an issue in my life. I've got some
Right.
struggles that I'm dealing with. And so now instead of dealing with those issues head on, I deny what's happening. And then I start
Mm,
to think about a solution, which is reminiscing about drugs. And then that leads to the physical, right? And so it's not always I just got up and decided to go out and do drugs today. There's a process. And a lot of times I think
right.
that's when you start to see the individual that struggled with addiction in the past, they start to disconnect, right, from people when they're in that emotional state. There's a little bit of
Mm.
I'm pulling back from the people that can actually help me, and then they're living elsewhere mentally long before they decide to use.
Thought it would be fitting to really let some of our audience know some signs to look out for when those that we love and cherish are struggling with their addiction and maybe even sober for a periodic time, and they end up going back into that addiction or that former life habit. What would you say are some good tools or some good warning signs that we should look out for people that are about to relapse?
Yeah, man, it's hard to notice that, right? Sometimes, and I think there's that challenge of seeing the best in people at times, right? And we
Mm,
want to, especially when you're walking somebody through addiction, like you've got to be able to see the best in that person, to see what's
yeah.
unseeable, but you can't allow that to push you into a place of delusion that you
Mm,
ignore the warning signs. And so I think that these warning signs, especially being able to notice them and see them, are important because have you ever seen a domino, right? You click
right.
that first one over and then it
Right.
ends up setting off a chain reaction. And so there are behavioral signs, there's stuff that people are doing, there's physical signs and all of that. But it's man, when we see that stuff and we see that first domino click over, it's man, you got to know that one thing is a big deal, right? It's we want to give grace and not hold accountable. And
Yeah.
and there is a difference between accountability and punishment, but we want to give
Right.
grace and not hold accountable. And we don't realize that, man, that one domino can set off a chain reaction. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah. The thing that I thought about was, and I can't remember the name of the book, but I read it through my internship in Teen Challenge. I want to say it was Boundaries for Parents.
Mm,
But there was a particular portion of the book where it said how we're not to look at our grown adult child or our grown adult as a child anymore at that
mm,
infant stage in diapers, because we have this idea in our minds after one overcomes addiction and goes to a rehabilitation center, they're like, oh, whether it's 3 6 a year long program, they've completed it. And it's like the parent's guard gets put down
mm.
because they're like, oh, my child has completed a task. He's done something or she's done something that she's never done before. There's my little Johnny again. There's my little Abby again. And the reality is that they're not little, they're grown
Yeah.
adults. And when proper systems aren't put in place and you allow yourself to be that individual that enables again rather than instructs and corrects and guides as a parent should, you often give those that are struggling in addiction the opportunity to utilize your vulnerability as the weakness that it is. And they're like a lion and they prey on that. They're like, yes, like this is my opportunity.
Right.
Mom's guards down. Hey, mom, let me hold this. Or, hey, mom or dad, let me do this. And I know for myself, man, I didn't really have that parent model figure in my life, but when I was going through my addiction very much. But I do know that when I got out of Teen Challenge and I reconciled with my mom and my stepdad, there was moments in my mind that I thought that I can play the trick on them when the reality is that I was only playing the trick on myself. So I think something that's really beneficial for people to look out for as a warning sign is that when you don't have proper systems put in place, or if you don't necessarily look at them as the adult that they are, it can cause you to put your guard down and open you up for opportunities for your child to redo the same thing that they've been doing all those years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, because I think for loved ones, I don't have any adult children that have walked through this, but I've got family members. I've got siblings that have walked through this process of I was clean, I had my life together, and now I'm trying to help them out. And I think
Right.
sometimes it's easy to overlook because we're afraid of losing them again. And I
Mm,
know that's a fear that some parents have to probably deal with. It's, man, I finally got my kid back. I finally got, they're active, they're in my life. I see the person that they were before the drugs and alcohol. And so like they're close and I enjoy that closeness. And so it's, man, if I step in and hold accountable, then what if they run off the rails again? And so sometimes it's easy to overlook, but man, there are on, I used to talk about this a lot and I've seen it in so many people where there's like a mental and emotional relapse that happens way before the physical relapse ever takes place.
I think about it.
Yeah, but there's like that lifestyle, right? The hustling mentality that some people carry. Like when you've been in a lifestyle of dealing drugs or whatever that might be, like that mindset of continuing to live like an addict, you know what I'm saying? Not becoming whole again, not becoming the new person in Christ. And there may not be drugs, you know what I'm saying? But that's where we've talked about a lot of getting to the root causes of addiction, dealing with those and getting healing, because not putting a needle in your arm isn't the only thing that elicits recovery, right? In a new life. There's so much more work beyond just using. I would argue that stopping the physical substance is the easy part of recovery. It was
Right.
painful, but that's the
Yeah.
easy part.
Dude, I think about my wife, for example. She went through Walter Hovick Home in Las Vegas, and she was, or so she thought, she was going to go to Bible college in Arizona. And she came back to the dorm after visiting her family, I believe, and there was a notice stating that there was an internship at SBTC, lo and behold. And she prayed about it, and the Lord told her to go that way, right? So she had just graduated, she's doing this internship, and she literally moves cross country to a totally different state. No familiar surroundings, people, just foreign to her, right? And there's something about starting new. But one thing I've learned about my wife, and I understand, is that like when her life, if she doesn't organize things, it's like a warning sign for me to ask her, "Are you okay?"
Mm,
Because I
yeah.
know how she was, or she's expressed to me how she was. And when she is not well, these are the certain habits that she has,
Yeah.
right?
That's good.
The chaos that's in their life. And I think one of the most important things that we can do for our children, or for those that we love that are struggling in addiction, is ask those kind of questions. How
Yeah.
can I help you? Rather than trying to be the savior of the situation, really learning to surrender and trust God with the child, because the child is his at the end of the day, but really just asking the question and coming alongside them as another brother or sister in Christ and saying, "Hey, how could I help you? Like,
Yeah.
where do you believe your shortcomings are? Or where can I hold you accountable?"
Yeah.
And I think in asking that question allows that individual to understand that you're not there to prevent them from doing what they want to do and dictate how they live their lives, but also what you're doing essentially is opening up the door to say, "Hey, look, I'm here for you. I'm
Mm,
not against you. I'm
yeah.
not going to condemn you because you've relapsed, but I want to make sure that I get you to the destination that you've been called to go to, because your life is more valuable than that needle or that pill that you're going to use."
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I was Google searching over here and I found some stuff on the cycle of relapse, and it talks about relapse as a process, right? Not a single event. And it goes back to what you were talking about just a few moments ago. There's emotional, mental, then physical, right? And like emotional kind of starts out with like the denial of the
Right,
circumstances. And then there's mental, where it's, I'm reminiscing about it now. I've had an issue in my life. I've got some
right,
struggles that I'm dealing with. And so now instead of dealing with those issues head on, I deny what's happening. And then I start to
Mm,
think about a solution, which is reminiscing about drugs. And then that leads to the physical, right? And so it's not always I just got up and decided to go out and do drugs today. There's a process. And a lot of times I think
right.
that's when you start to see the individual that struggled with addiction in the past, they start to disconnect, right, from people when they're in that emotional state. There's a little bit of
Mm,
I'm pulling back from the people that can actually help me, and then they're living elsewhere mentally long before they decide to use.
wow. So it's like the organic conversations. It's, hey, you might have sat down and ate breakfast with the family every morning, and then now it's, oh, wait, he's sleeping in. Why is he sleeping in?
Yeah,
He used to go to the gym. Why is he not going to the gym anymore? Or like just the things that you would see them pick up, I think, after recovery is a telltale sign, right? Because generally speaking, these rehabilitation centers, there's systems that are put in place that they
yeah,
abide by. TC taught us to wake up early, make our bed, do a devotional. You had breakfast, you did your devotional, you had your work day, you came home from your work day, did whatever, a little bit of free time, had dinner, then had chat. There was a routine. I
yeah,
think routines are really good. And I think one of the things that you can look out for if you're a parent is what's the routine of my child? And maybe they're not living at home. And I think that's hard too when they're not living at home because we have to address that too, right? Because a lot of these people may not, or may be, they are, but may not be living at home. So
yeah.
like how do we handle that, right? You don't want to be overbearing and you don't want to be like calling them every single day. What are you doing? Did you eat your breakfast? Did you take your vitamins?
Right,
No,
but
you
there's
don't want
that
to be that weird parent.
but that communication, when it decreases, that's the question.
Yeah.
Whatever is your normal, right? So whatever is your normal healthy levels of communication, if that starts to just drop, like, I would be asking questions, right? And the one thing I noticed too, outside of some of those folks that like to take these random social media fasts, but like when the TC graduates that I worked with were doing well, they are posting on social constantly. Right now,
Mhm.
that's for the ones that were using Facebook. Obviously, there's a whole generation that has moved to Snap and TikTok and everywhere else where they got the disappearing messages, and people still like that for some reason. But for those
Right.
that I was connected with on Facebook, when they were doing well, they were eager to talk about it. And then all of
Mhm.
a sudden, they just ghosted their social media presence
Yeah.
because nobody's going to shout their failures out. And those are the times where it's, brother, I haven't seen you post in a while. Are you doing okay? Yeah, man, I'm
Yeah.
just, and the one conversation is, yeah, man, I'm taking a break from social or whatever. And it's just, I'm here, I'm praying for you, et cetera, et cetera. But watching that, yeah, that's why I like the whole idea of what Ace talks about a lot, like recovering out loud. And,
Mm.
and because it is that accountability piece. And so if I'm a parent and I'm seeing that and I'm not living at home with them, I'm going to probably start asking some questions. I don't know. What about
Yeah.
you? What do you think?
It's hard, right? Because this is just from my perspective, coming out of addiction and not already having a really well established relationship with my mom and then trying to create that was foreign and awkward, right? Like at first, because it was like, man, I love my mom. She's an amazing woman of God, like all these great things. But how do I cultivate a relationship that was never there? And I didn't know how to do that. A lot of times in my addiction, what I ended up doing, Justin, was really pushing people away. And
Yeah.
though I was well, I still had a tendency to push people away. And that people to hear me say that, it's like, what do you mean, Rob? Like you're the most outgoing individual in the world. Yeah, I'm actually a really good extrovert slash introvert. Like I
Mm,
like being by myself. And
yeah.
so I'm really good at keeping my distance with individuals. And the saying is like playing the part. Like I could fool people to believe that everything was okay when things weren't okay because I didn't want to let people in.
Yeah.
Because the second I let people in, it was like it was exposing all this baggage and so on and so forth. And there's only a few people that I let in because it's I don't want to deal with the drama. And like going back to answering your question, I think that it's good to have that healthy boundary relationship and communication with your child, but also too for those that are struggling in addiction, it might take time. And I think it's important to understand as the parent to give that space and let it happen organically.
Yeah.
Don't be overbearing, but let it happen organically. Make your presence known, whether you set up a call once a week. It's, hey, look, you don't have to call me every day. I just want to hear your voice once a week and
Yeah.
check up on them, right? Maybe you go out, you have a bite to eat, or so on and so forth. But sometimes, man, it can be overbearing because it's something that's new to them. You got to understand, you were once dead, you've come back to life, you're under this new way of living, and now all this, like, it's almost overwhelming because everybody like celebrates you and praises you, and that can be very dangerous in and of itself, because stepping out of addiction and getting all this praise, it's boom. Then when that dissipates and it's no longer there, it's, oh wait, what's going on here? Like, why aren't people praising me and giving me all this glory?
Mm,
It's like my child when she's 2 years old and she uses the potty, we're like, yay. But
mm,
imagine doing that with an adult. You're 24 years old. You just use the bathroom. Yay, Johnny, you used the bathroom. I'm so excited. I'm so happy for you. You know what I mean? And so it's like, how do we navigate and walk alongside our child, or let's just say our friend, right? Let's distinguish the difference, right? Or separate the two, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be parent and child, but how do you walk alongside your friend and help them? And
yeah.
I think I look at it like the Good Samaritan. If they're broken and they're hurting, don't just walk past it. If you acknowledge something, even if it results in the relationship being broken, don't let your child just sit there in pain because you're so afraid of them no longer wanting to be in relationship with you. No, like that's
Yeah.
not a friend. That love looks differently. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, sometimes these warning signs are there, but parents are afraid to say anything because they don't want to lose their
Yeah.
child like they previously did in the past.
Yeah.
And so we have to be careful to not allow these things to slip through the crack, and be very cautious to understand that this is someone's life that God has stewarded you with, and you have to take responsibility for that. And yes, it's hard, and sometimes you can't do anything, but if you have the ability to do something, speak
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, for sure. No, thinking about that, man, and just knowing what that process and that journey of recovery is going to look like. I used to shared an illustration. Like I ran cross country in middle school for a couple months. That wasn't my thing, but I did my first meet, my first cross country meet. And I think about running those longer races like that. And I imagine outside of doing these huge marathons in these big cities where people are everywhere cheering them on, I noticed something. There was a crowd of people at the starting line and there was a crowd of people at the finish line, right?
Mm,
But the in between stages, it was just me and the trail. And recovery feels like that a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like when I'm starting, especially just starting out, getting the life together, and you start sharing the testimony, and you know this is what God's. There's a lot of people there cheering you on. But then as you begin to mature, you know what I'm saying? You're going to get further along in this journey, that crowd falls off. And so unless you've been real intentional about building the disciplines to put good people in your life or really work on the mental game to be able to endure, then that section in between the start line and the finish line can be difficult. And so
mm,
I think for parents, it's knowing that it's, man, they are still building those disciplines. They're learning how to deal with themselves. They're learning how to be themselves, figure out who they are as people. And that's a journey, man. That's a long, drawn out journey. And fighting that
mm,
mental game is sometimes hard. And so if you see them step off or slow down or start to do something differently that's maybe out of character of the new person, those are the moments where, like you said, I'm just stepping in and cheering them on. I'm encouraging because no matter, I'll say this, if I know for me, no matter how old I get, I still enjoy affirmation from my parents or other people.
always, dude.
It just doesn't matter how old I get. Like I send a video to a client and they send a message back and say, man, you crushed it on that video. Like my eyes light up when I read that. I enjoy hearing that. And
Yeah,
so
the
those are the,
validation.
yeah, those are the parts where we can be intentional loving somebody that we might think is slipping to just speak life.
Yeah. No, that's so good. I remember Greg Hammond from Teen Challenge. He always said, he's, Robert, you're a man. I've never met any man that has ever said that they've been encouraged too much. You can never encourage a man enough, or a woman enough for that matter. But the thing that really sparked something in me with what you were just saying is looking at how you see them in their condition, and you see where they're weak,
Mm.
and you come in and be strong. And it makes me think of the passage of Paul or 2 Corinthians, where Paul said, your grace is sufficient, for your strength is made perfect in my weakness.
Yeah.
And I think we need to take a second to understand that it's okay to be weak.
Yeah.
It's okay to be weak as a parent, but it's okay to be weak as one that has overcome addiction and is going through the rehabilitation process.
Mm.
Because your weakness doesn't define who you are. Your weakness opens up opportunity for God to come in and usher his presence.
Yeah.
And so God wants to work in your weakness. And I think we have this facade, this idea in our minds that when we're whole, we have it all together. We're going to have everything figured out. We're going to be able to conquer the world. And the reality is, God, I don't want you to have it all together and be able to conquer the world. I want you to be weak so that you're reliant and dependent upon me and me alone.
Mm.
And see, when you come out of addiction thinking that it's you that have done it, that's when you end up going back into your relapse, because then you begin to compromise and go and do things that you used to do before, thinking that you're strong enough
Right.
to be surrounded by those individuals
Yeah.
that were once like-minded like you. And the thing is I can't do that, bro. Like I can't. Like I can be around people that drink and stuff and have a beer or whatnot, but I'm not gonna sit there and be at a party where people are getting obliterated. Like I'm just not
Mhm.
gonna do. Like I don't choose to do that,
But it's 10
and
years,
that's for
Rob. You're strong enough.
no. I'm not. I'm still in the flesh.
There it is. That's good.
I'm still in the flesh.
Yeah.
It's that's like saying, hey, look, I'm gonna put you in a room full of women, and I'm just gonna. No, dude. I'm in the flesh. I'm married. I love my wife, but I'm in the flesh. I cannot do this. Jesus tells us, you can do nothing apart from me.
Right.
And see, this is why community is so vital to those that are going through anything in life,
Yeah.
especially in the rehabilitation process. Because when we come together, and I heard this man say this, and I'm going to give him credit. Nobody really knows who he is. He works with me. Awesome man of faith. He came out of addiction. But he said, community, common unity, community. It's a common unity.
Right.
What is your common unity,
Yeah.
right? Find the common unity with your child and bond again.
That's so good. Yeah, man.
And I think when you learn to bond with your child begins to open up. And I know this because of the relationship that I've been able to build with my son over these last couple of years.
Mm.
When I got to bond with him on this recent camping trip, he's like, Dad, I got to share this with you, or Dad, I got to. And it's cool to see that, but it's because we connected.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think often we try to connect with our children in the wrong manner because
Yeah.
we have our own ideas of what it means to connect. When the reality is, it's not about you,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
right? We got
good.
to put others first. And
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good, man. Yeah. It's just that connection piece is so vital and really challenging that status quo. You know what I'm saying? In
yeah,
relationships. And I think that honestly, man, there's nothing like the one thing I would say to parents who are watching some of this process is like, you're never going to get it all right. You know what I'm saying?
mm,
And I know that even in my own parenting and trying to love on people that are struggling through addiction and all that, like we do the best to educate ourselves. We do the best to be present. And yeah, obviously it's hard to do when you're being pushed away, but we still try to love. But ultimately, end of the day, I would also tell parents to just be gentle on themselves, give themselves grace as well, because they're not going to get it right. But also, like you talk about those signs and the whole domino illustration, like like if we can intervene early, if we can show that love and show up early on, then we can prevent this domino effect from happening, right? I push further and further away from the rock bottom more and more
right.
because it's 2023 and rock bottom is deadly. So it's more of a mental than a physical rock bottom, right?
Yeah, and let me say something really quick as we get ready to conclude and wrap up. But I want to say something to the parents that are partnered with us that didn't get to watch out for those warning signs. Your job's not finished, and it wasn't a mistake. And I know it hurts because I don't know what it's like to lose a child. Just thinking about knowing some of the people that are on this podcast that support us, that have lost a loved one through addiction, and they couldn't rescue them in their weakest moments. God is utilizing something for the greater good. And it's stirring up something in you to be not just a superhero in somebody else's life, but for you to understand that God works all things together for the good of those that love him according to his purpose. We don't understand the mind of God, but one thing I do know is that God is sovereign and he's in control. And he has the ability to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that we can ask or think. Oh, you got a
Yeah.
drink? Awesome, baby. And so, yeah, my little girl just came in here, but yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And so I just want to encourage you as a parent. Uh, oh, you got some juice? Yeah, daddy's gonna be there in a little bit. Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah, that's awesome,
Just yeah,
man.
just encourage you guys just to have the hope that you need.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you found a snail. Okay, my kid's just bringing snails.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all good, man. It's been a good conversation. Yeah, man. I for those
Take
who are
that
what
outside. Go outside with that. Sorry.
no, you're good.
He's making bubbles in the house.
For those that are watching, we just want to thank you for jumping in and on joining the conversation. And I think Rob and I were talking a little bit about trying to do more content aimed because we realized we took a look at the people following us on social and realized that there were a lot of family members out there. And so we want to start putting some encouraging content together to help those of you who are walking with an addict and maybe just not in addiction and really serving you guys. And if you're following along and you see this, don't hesitate to drop a comment and let us know what type of content you want. And also, if you have a prayer need, we put a form on our website. You can go to the website. I'll drop the link in the comments. Submit your prayer request, whether that be for you or for a loved one. We just love the opportunity to pray for you. And when you do that, we also have a freebie. It's got 12 prayers that you can pray walking through addiction or walking through addiction with your loved ones. Man, Rob, good conversation. Thanks for jumping on and doing this again. It's always a blast.
Absolutely. Absolutely, bro. Love you, man. We love you guys. And I'm so excited to see what the Lord does because, guys, it's only because of you that we're able to do what we do. And so we thank you for your continued support and just loving us and sharing the page. And so we love you guys.